Texas A&M a couple weeks into camp. Of course, Mike Elko gets that grace period, that honeymoon, but maybe it doesn't last too long at Texas A&M considering their high standards, the resources involved, and the disappointments of recent years. But Elko comes back to Texas A&M, of course, to win championships. We got Cameron Honesty on the line from Aggies Wire. Please like the video, subscribe right here. Head on over to Aggies Wire. Check out Cameron's work. Cameron, how you doing today?
Doing well. How are you, man?
I'm good. I am good. We just want to catch up on fall camp. But before we do that, of course, the commitment coming in from DJ Sanders is a huge one. Of course, he was coveted by just about everyone across the board, and Texas A&M was able to get that one done.
That was a big one, taking him from Texas. Obviously, the recruiting this summer has been interesting with Texas entering the SEC, obviously being the rivals they are. It's now going to be a tougher recruiting battle year after year in the state. Obviously, the defensive line for A&M has been the strength coming into this season with Elko. Obviously, he's been known for trying to build through the trenches and then build, go through the secondary, try to build the defense that way. So getting Sanders right now is huge. I mean, the continuation going into next year of who they're going to return. Obviously, this season, you've got already a loaded defensive line. So for Aggie fans who have kind of seen how the recruiting has gone, maybe missing out on some of the premier wide receivers has been tough to see. But at the same time, that will come with better offensive play. But right now, we know the strength is defensive line. So I'm not surprised. It was a surprise to many, but I had heard through some recruiting guys that I discussed with over the past 2 weeks that this was something that could happen. And the relationship he built with Elko is great, and he's going to be a great addition next season.
And another commitment here just in the last few days out of Spring, Texas, Joshua Moses, an interior offensive lineman. All right, we get to fall camp, and let's stay right there because we have the strength of the team, defensive line. It's stacked with guys coming back and Nick Scorton joining from Purdue. So the defensive line seems to be very much in place. Anything there in regards to backup positions or key components there as you take us through the defense? Of course, big losses in linebacker. Scooby Williams comes in from Florida.
Yeah, so I would say kind of the drumbeat that's building. I think that's one of the terms we all use when camps arrive, whether it's college football, NFL, what guys are standing out day after day at a consistent manner. Shamar Stewart, who's coming into his junior season, has been, and I think a lot of recruiting people know, he was the number one player in the 2022 class out of Florida. This is a guy, I think he's listed right now, and it's kind of hilarious even saying it. I think he's 6'6", 290. I mean, and he's going to be playing defensive end. This is somebody who could play defensive line, kind of shift inside of the 4-eye. He's that strong. He's that fast. He's that athletic. He has been a guy who I think he broke the sled actually during their 6th practice. I mean, he's just that strong. It's incredible to see because he's a player that we've just been waiting to take that next step. And he had a presser on, I believe it was Monday, where he has very lofty goals. He wants 15 sacks, this season. And a lot of us kind of heard that and went, okay, that's I don't know if that's going to happen, but you got to think Nick Scorton had 10 last season, could have had more with Purdue. And this is a guy in Stewart who has all the talent, and he's finally learning all those fundamentals that maybe he wasn't quite up to snuff with last season and in his freshman year, but he got close a lot of the time. One of our better reporters, Carter Carroll's at a gig in 24/7 Sports, kind of noted that if you watch the film, and I went back and actually watched the last 3 or 4 games, Stewart was very close to getting sacks. Almost every play he was on the field, he was getting in the backfield, he was getting his hand there. It didn't happen. So I think you're finally going to see, with Scorton now creating that pressure on the outside, guys like David Hicks and DJ Hicks and Gabriel Brown-Lodindi and a very deep, and Shamar Turner on the inside, a very deep defensive line where they can rotate guys in. Pressure's going to come up the middle, and then that's going to submerge inside, and you're going to have 2 of these guys just wreaking havoc. And another name that I think a lot of Aggie fans maybe have forgotten because they got so many transfer portal players, Cassius Howell, who's one of the premier edges coming out of Bowling Green, had 9.5 sacks last year. He was a guy that defense coordinator Jay Bateman mentioned in one of the pressers this week of saying he's a guy to really watch. Very versatile. We can put him pretty much anywhere, but I think he's going to be placed on the edge, but playing full-time edge for the most part, cleaning up runs, providing a lot of pass rush. So the defensive line is going to be the strength of this team. I have no doubt about it. That's an area that I think everybody's just excited to see. While everywhere else, it's kind of, it's prove it, because every season, the definite strength. And then everywhere else is kind of like, well, I think they're good here, but I just want to see it play out.
15 sacks. Yeah, it doesn't happen very often. That's Will Anderson, Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, Chase Young, Aiden Hutchinson kind of stuff right there. But it does happen. There are guys that are able to do it. Usually like one guy per season nationally, something in that range.
He certainly has the talent for it. So
I mentioned Scooby Williams coming in from Florida to help the linebacker core. Of course, Edgerrin Cooper's gone. If you can take us through the rest of the defense in regards to what battles are ensuing.
So defensively for the linebacker core specifically, I wouldn't say they're a work in progress. I think having Torrin York coming back after having one of the best freshman seasons we've seen, especially with A&M, this was like 3-star recruit coming out. He was actually committed to Baylor, decommitted, almost committed to Duke with Elko during his time there. So he's got a close relationship with Elko, who's been recruiting him for years. He's a guy that you can rely on. Obviously, Solomon DeShields coming in from Pitt is a very reliable backer, very athletic guy who they're trying to find out what his position specifically and his usage at the linebacker corps is. And there's a couple other names. Scooby Williams is one of them. He's been doing very well so far in camp, doing everything they ask him to do. This is a guy who I think during his first season at Florida, he was extremely productive. And then he had some lapses, some kind of boneheaded plays here and there, and, missing things in coverage, missing tackles. But again, very, very talented, with a high 4-star recruit coming in. Jay Bateman, who's the linebacker coach at Florida, knows how to use him correctly. And that's the biggest thing that's going to push this group forward to actually being a consistent group outside of York. And I mean, I'm going to be honest, outside of coverage, they probably don't have to do as much. Even the defensive line is so good, especially against the run. These guys just clean it up, but obviously be consistent in coverage, especially in that middle passing game. But that's a group that I think after the first week against Notre Dame and then going into I think their bout with Arkansas, they're going to go against some really good run teams, and we'll kind of find out what they have there. But obviously Torrin York, I think this is going to be an all SEC linebacker season for him. But yeah, 2 names, obviously Solomon DeShields, Scooby Williams is a guy who I do think will play more. And there's a couple other names back there, but they're still kind of weeding things out in camp. And then the biggest area I think that everybody's been paying attention, especially us, is the secondary. I mean, the cornerback room last year was horrific. Jimbo Fisher, one of the things that could have gotten him fired, to be perfectly honest with you, was the lack of urgency in the transfer portal to get starting level talent at the cornerback position. Elko, all he had to do was watch, 3 games, I think, of the 23 season against, 2 of them were against Ole Miss and Alabama, were 2 of their ex-wide receivers who weren't that athletic, just fast enough and big on the outside. They just murdered A&M secondary. I mean, 2 of them had over 200 yards received. I think forgetting the Ole Miss receiver, Trey
Harris.
Trey Harris, yeah. I think he had about 210 against them or something. I mean, it was brutal because they just didn't have the size, they didn't have the experience. So they went out there. They got guys in Will Lee Jr. from Kansas State, BJ Mays from UAB, 2 of the top coverage corners. And then you've got a lot of guys inside, especially in the slot position. We're talking about recruiting. Terry Bussey, who we all know was the best athlete in the 24 class. That kid can do it all, but Elko and Bateman had both noted that he's most likely going to play corner his first year. Obviously, going into next season in his sophomore year, we could see him at wide receiver, kind of in some special packages. But he's battling right now for a potential starting slot position, which is a surprise to many, or at least a rotational spot because of his athleticism, because of his tracking speed, and because of his ball skills. So they've got a lot of options there now, which they didn't before. But one of the big names that is coming back for the cornerback room is Tyreek Chappelle. He missed a lot of the season last year due to injury. He actually entered the transfer portal briefly, came back. He is their senior dependable guy. So I think you have a lot of bodies out there. You have a lot of talent. You got a lot of guys with experience. And then you got someone like Chappelle to kind of lead the way. I think that group is going to be much improved. I don't know if they're going to be a strength of the team, but I think they're going to be much, much better than they were last. I mean, you got to be better than you were last year because A&M literally, I would say, should have probably ended the season with 8 to 9 wins, but because of how poor they were in pass defense, you end up ending, going 7-6 on the year. So